Michael, thank you so much for coming on. We were just having a chat about lockdown, actually. We're talking about both of us going through different quarantine processes. You've gone through yours. I've gone through mine here in the UK. Have you been actually once you got out of quarantine, how's life been and how's things over in Australia for you?
Look, I must say, Australia's obviously very progressed in this whole COVID process when it comes to quarantine and managing sort of local transmissions and things like that. So for us, it was more, for me, I'm managing living in two countries, which prior to COVID was not really an issue. But obviously now with COVID, moving back and forth is almost impossible. So I'm only back for some work things and some medical things. But, my prime objective is going back to Bali and being with my kids. So it is for people that used to live in more than one country, COVID's definitely affected us. And I'm sort of trying to manage the time away from the kids as best as I can. And but yeah, as you know, it's not easy. You're doing it at home, but trying to do it in the hotel room with no windows, etc. It gets a bit daunting. But I think Australia's got some good news on the horizon that you can basically quarantine at home, which what you are doing now. So but everyone's going through the same thing, so I can't complain.
I didn't know that they just released that information that they were going to allow quarantine at home. That'd be so much better. That's going to be,
that'd be good.
way better. So how when you with lockdown and coronavirus wasn't a thing, you're going back and forward to Bali, to Australia, to Bali.
Yeah.
How long are you staying in each place usually? Like,
oh, look, normally it really depends on work and obligations, but I have my kids week on, week off, so I rain, hell or shine, I try and make sure I'm back for having the kids on the Friday after the school and up till I drop them off to school the following Friday. So and then we sort of my ex-wife, we work our schedules according to that, and but yeah, it became quite hard to manage, and from a health point of view as well, and then being present as well. So I sort of tried to do, maybe 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off rather than a week on, week off. It got pretty tiring.
Yeah, and you mentioned your business as well. I'll go straight into that, to be fair. Like you started your own company after your career.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind starting Milk & Co? So,
well, I mean, the inspiration was out of necessity, really, because, when you come towards the end of an athlete's career, outside of the professional realm, like soccer or basketball or whatever, tennis, I had to start planning for life after sport. And, I'd sort of had a little bit of foot in with some property and some sim schools, but I needed to create something that was my own and I could grow over the years, which at the time I never thought it'd be skincare. It was quite a bit of I know there was definitely an opportunity that I saw in the Australian market, that there was, men weren't really using skincare products, and we were very sort of nonchalant about it, to be honest. And even through the UK, on average, the British guys are using 3 or 4, skincare products, whereas the Aussie man will be using maybe 1 or 2 on average. So I thought there was definitely an opportunity for the brand to grow and create something from an Aussie guy that was just having that local connection was really important. So, I started with 3 products and grew the brand from there. And we have about 35, 40 products now that span from baby, men, and women. We used to be stocked in Boots in the UK and all around, sell fridges, etc. But now we're back and just trying to reestablish ourselves in that sort of not FMCG world, but more of this pharmacy world in Australia. So, we're trying to be the go-to brand within that market.
That's interesting. That is a culture difference that I reckon I noticed as well with men in Australia. I don't know whether it must be something to do with like the cultural upbringing of men of like don't like rough it out over here like there seem to be probably a few more. I guess people will just blanket them as prima donnas, but they'll say like, well, they're actually looking after their skin. But in Australia, you have to, like, you're getting brutalized by that sun. Like it's
absolutely.
intense. Like you have to
Yeah,
do something. Like you can't. I definitely noticed the difference in mine from just spending like the last 18 months there. So
yeah,
it's
absolutely. And it's I think Aussies, when they go to Europe, they love the European tan. But I think when we come to Australia, it's pretty harsh, and obviously skin cancer is a big deal here, and we sort of try and make sure that people aren't blatantly sunbaking like we used to maybe 20 years ago. But
yeah.
so I think there's certainly a different perspective on skincare. So it's more protective, and it's more sustainable, and it's trying to make the skin last for the years, rather than just looking good for 1 or 2 years and then see you later.
Yeah. How did you go through coronavirus? How was there? Was there adaptations you had to work through?
Oh, definitely. It was pretty tough actually for me, because I used to, as I said, I used to travel back and forth between Australia and Bali, and I had a team in Sydney, but then suddenly, as of March last year, I was unable to do that, unable to front up in front of my team. So yeah, and there was definitely a slowdown in numbers and our sales. So we had to find other opportunities where we could regain those sort of those sales and opportunities. So we moved more into digital, but it's very, in a short period of time. Not everyone gets to pivot like people talk about pivoting, but it's a lot of the time it takes months and years to reestablish yourself in different channels, where we've built ourselves on being very bricks and mortar. So working with our retailers has been a big key. And for me, the travel part has been hard, being away from my family is one, and then being away from my companies too. So it's been a pretty interesting period. And I think everyone's got different challenges. And for me, there's displacement has been the biggest part.
Yeah, what do you think you've learned the most out of it, this whole sort of coronavirus experience, with being a business owner, having your kids away as well?
Mm. Yeah, look, I've definitely learned to prioritize things better, and I think I used to do a lot of things for the sake of just ticking the box rather than being productive. And I think it made me probably in more of a personal level realize what I want to do long term, rather than I was kind of running this wheel for many years, and sales and etc. But from a longevity point of view, I realized that I want to look after the brand and look after the people that are involved in it, rather than necessarily knocking on 100 doors every month. So it's been a pretty interesting year, because I think everyone's realized what their objectives are.
Yeah, like so many different challenges, and it's been, and coming back to England, it's seeing how people have done it over here. It's just walking out in the streets and seeing the shops that are now getting to open after a year of being shut. I just can't imagine that sort of stress, even though the government over here have done it in a slightly different way to Australia. But madness. I mean, we'll get on to swimming. Like, one of the things that I didn't realize this year was, the first thing I found out was that swimming's the most popular sport in Australia. That it's the most active one.
It's a number one Olympic sport. And I think, it's very much cultural. We had an amazing sort of team back in 56 and the Melbourne Olympics, and it definitely stayed within, many generations. So the Murray Rose, the John Conrads, the Dawn Frasers, and so it's been in part of our heritage for so long. So I think Australians almost expect some success in the pool, and it's sometimes most of the time we do tend to bat above our average. But I think that the world of sport in general has changed so much that you've got Eastern European countries, and you've got the Brits are doing so well this year at the trials, and so I think they're definitely, even though we're the number one Olympic sport, I think that's the domination, unfortunately, is over.
Yeah, it's just kind of, you just can't get away from the footy on TV and like cricket that are just
yeah, yeah,
big sports in the country. But you then look at the amount of people that if you just go down to the local beach, you've got your surf lifesaving, you've got people that are doing your triathlons, your Ironmans, and just
yeah,
doing recreational swimming. There is a lot of people in the water. Like there's just
yeah, yeah,
it's just like I said, it's a part of culture. It's like friends of mine have got new kids and they're at that age where you send them straight away to surf lifesaving because you
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
need to know how to swim in Australia. It's like
yeah.
almost a need to know thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've definitely. I mean, I've been involved in the learn to swim business for many years, and I think it's almost a responsibility on parents, and even majority of the schools have it as a compulsory kind of activity. So yeah, I think it's not only the beaches, but the lakes and rivers and pools. I think it's as parents, you kind of expect your kids to be able to swim and swim well and be safe. But unfortunately, even though we provide all these services, the drowning numbers are still rising, which is a bit concerning. But so yeah, I think especially through last year where there was a big chunk of lessons that were missed through COVID and venues being shut. So from my standpoint, I like to make sure that their kids get back into it and learn a very essential skill.
Why would that be that the drownings are going up?
Well, it's last year, obviously, with COVID, there was, I guess, majority of the kids missed out on their water safety and learned to swim kind of exposure. Right. And, then I guess the country was reopened and drownings do happen like accidents, and it's very unfortunate, but they can most of the time be prevented. So, from making sure the parents are attentive, not on their phones, have the right safety, et cetera, et cetera. So, unfortunately, it's continued to rise. So, but yeah, I think it's definitely on the front objective of many sort of not only just governments locally, but throughout Australia to make sure those numbers come down.
Yeah. So you ended up swimming for Australia, but you're learning to swim. I read or heard that you had learned in India, and you were born in Poland.
Yeah.
How did that all happen?
It's pretty, it's not normal, I guess. But so my parents were involved I'm Polish. I was born in Poland. My dad worked for the Polish consulate. And when I was about just over one, he got a station in Bombay in India. So we moved there for about 4.5, 5 years. And I guess I learned to swim around the same time I learned to walk. So the climate was obviously very conducive for that. And mum and dad, or mainly dad, would drop us off at the pool in the morning and pick us up, 8 hours later when he was done. But I think it's funny how history repeats itself, because I'm almost going through a very similar sort of upbringing with my kids, that they're involved and they go to a place called Finns in Bali, and it's very colonial and expat kind of focused. And my kids have been exposed to a very sort of similar upbringing that I have.
Yeah. So, and you speak Polish?
I speak Polish at home. I lived in Germany for a couple of years, so I speak a bit of German, and then went to Canada and ended up in Australia. But so I think that sort of transient upbringing served me well, especially when I was competing. I like the fact that I was able to adapt to languages and cultures and people, and then going through being slightly a different kid in high school. I think in the long term served me well.
So how old were you when you went to Australia and you moved over there?
Yeah, I was 11, and I signed up to a swimming club before I signed up to any school or for me, swimming was something that remained very constant through all these things that changed, like countries and friends, etc. So, the first mum and dad knew that I not only enjoyed it, but I was good at it. So they facilitated everything for me. And I signed up to Melbourne Vixen, a swimming club, which still to this day exists. The pool doesn't, but I sort of felt that I had a great affinity with people in the swimming club rather than school or etc.
Was there a moment, a person, or like a coach that suddenly made you realize, or was it yourself that made you realize that this is something that I can take and potentially start to do well in?
Mm. Look, it's an interesting question, because when you're a junior, there's so many people telling you that you can be, the next, Duncan Armstrong or the next Ian Thorpe. But, like, I think it's, as you go through the ages and the divisions, you sort of get exposed to what it's really like. So I think I was, I had a great coach when I was 12, 13 that sort of let me progress in a natural way. But then when I got to 15, 16, I had some scouts sort of tapping me on my shoulder and saying, if you devote yourself 100%, which I thought I was already, you can really, you can really achieve great things. So I think it's the recognition and that you have from the sport itself that make you sort of continue. And I moved to the AIS, Australian Institute of Sport, when I was 16, moved out of home and finished my schooling by correspondence. And I think it's not sacrifices, it's just the choices that I made just to, stick in the sport.
And there was a conscious moment for you that you were like, well, going to the Olympics was a goal. Was that always the goal, or had you set smaller incremental things along the way?
Look, I felt that, my first Olympic, I was ranked number 1 in the world. I was 18, heading to Atlanta. And for me, the opportunity was right there. And unfortunately, I missed that. And I had in my mind, it was a failed opportunity, and I had to rework everything. And I changed a lot of things about my swimming, from my technique to my approach to racing and training, etc. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of positive things happen from negative experiences, and it is a cliche, but in my case, it was definitely, the truth, because I went on to, within 11 months, breaking world records in my individual events and becoming world champion. And if it wasn't for that real harsh reality of realizing that I wasn't quite good enough in 96, I'm not sure if that would have happened.
Was there something specific that you sort of found that needed changing from that experience?
It's probably my mental state. I think getting up on the blocks and, when the whistle goes and the pool kind of quietens, I was still, I was almost running the race over in my head and burning a lot of nervous energy. And I think when, talk to any good athletes, it doesn't matter if it's swimming or running or cycling, I think the more relaxed, the clear-headed you can be, the better your outcome. And I think I used to overanalyze and overstress, and so I learned a lot of things about myself as a person and also as an athlete. So because I raced so much the year following the Olympics, getting up on the blocks at the World Championships, less than 18 months later was no big deal. And luckily the results came to fruition.
Was there anything you used or a method, a technique that you used to help change your mental state?
There was definitely breathing, certain types of breathing exercises, having a really sort of concrete structure when it came to warming up and getting myself behind the blocks. That was really important for me. So, and then, using tricks of people, and you learn, I guess, to read people in that marching room, and how you can, if you spend time with one person, they can actually be detrimental to your performance, and if you spend time with the other, it could be actually beneficial. So for me, it was more, staying, pretty mentally open and not engaged in the actual race until the last moment possible. So it looked like I didn't care sometimes, but it was more about the fact that I could switch on within 5 minutes. And if I did that any earlier, then I'd be, I wasn't very good off.
So you were in a very strong era of Australian swimming as well. Like, you were some powerhouses around your time. And you mentioned there not spending too much time with one person, because you competed both individually and in a team.
Yeah.
What was there certain people you would gravitate to, or did you just believe there was a strength in going between everyone and just taking bits from everyone?
Look, it really depended on the circumstance, and if it was dependent on the race and who was in the marshalling room. Definitely, when you're racing as a team, you try and stick together as much as you can, except for when your teammates not ready. And we had that circumstance when Ian Thorpe wasn't quite right for the 4x1 freestyle relay, and only emerged into the marshalling area when we were being called out. So I think it really depends on the occasion and who's there with you, and if you've got teammates, etc. So most of the time I would just focus on my kind of lead up routine and making sure I was warming up at the last moment possible before the pool was kind of shut, and then before my race. And I liked having things in control, but then obviously things don't always go that way. So that was I think the one thing I learned that you couldn't really predict, who you're going to talk to or who you're not going to talk to, etc. So I think it was being comfortable in your own preparation was the key.
Did you ever have to change? Like, this is, forgive my ignorance on swimming this side of it, but obviously swimming on your own, competing for just yourself in one race, to then going into a team event. What's the change that you have to make there as an individual?
Yeah, it's interesting because for me, all my best splits and times were done in team environments, and I feel that, I don't know, I think I used to over-focus when it came to individual performances, and I think that focus was kind of diluted a little bit amongst my teammates, and I was just focused on the actual race itself rather than outcomes and etc. And I think my ability to swim on an automatic kind of setting was able to come out. So, I think that little bit of extra focus and stress, which could potentially be a centimetre every stroke or maybe even less, can add up to being half a meter at the end.
Yeah, and it's also well documented, like the amount of training that swimmers have to do, like the miles, and I've done a bit of swim training myself, and it is insane amount you have to do to get to a certain level. What did your sort of lead up to a games look like from a training point of view? What was the sort of regiment you were doing as a squad?
Yeah, I think back in the day we definitely overtrained. There's no doubt about that. I think the swimmers these days, they're probably doing half the volume that we did. They're probably much more sophisticated when it comes to dry land training. And if you're racing for 48 seconds, it doesn't make sense that you're training for 20 odd hours in the pool a week. So I think there's been a big transformation in terms of what is actually beneficial and how much time you need to spend in the pool, and also with injury prevention and also like mindfulness as well. So I think the swimmers in the last sort of 4 to 5 years, even longer, have found a bit of a sweet spot. Trying to stay positive and upbeat and fresh, and rather than always breaking your body down and trying to rebuild in every preparation. So it's been, I think that's the way forward.
Was there a lot of burnout when you were?
Absolutely. I think the burnout occurred. The people that didn't burn out not generally did really well, and they either won medals or, succeeded. So I think it was almost survival of the fittest back when I was swimming, and the ones that couldn't manage the training and couldn't manage the intensity generally didn't do well, but the ones that survived the training pool would, do okay in the racing scenario. So I think it probably wasn't, now looking back at it, wasn't the smartest approach, and now I feel that the programs are very bespoke to each individual athlete, I should say, and that way you can get the best out of everybody.
Is that would there be something that you reckon you would have done differently now, if you knew what you knew now, I guess?
Interesting. I think I got to a stage in my career when I felt I used all the resources that were available to me, and I enjoyed going overseas. I used to go to Bath, to the university there, and swim in the UK a lot. Swim in Cyprus with the Dutch guys. Used to go and swim all around the world. And I think when I, first felt that I was going to retire, I sort of just buckled down at home and just trained on my own. Whereas I think what gave me a lot of pleasure and like opened my mind, it's kind of like a bit of creative process. It's swimming with people from different nations and different squads. So if anything, I would have probably exposed myself to that a little bit more towards the end of my career.
Yeah. And I'd seen on your Instagram that you had gone into things like mindfulness and yoga, and you tried them out. And Bali, like I don't think you can run away from it in Bali.
Yeah.
Have you implemented those things in your career or out of your career now?
Definitely out of my career now. And I think it's something that became more prevalent for me once I finished sport, and I tried to keep up this kind of lifestyle where it was not only damaging on my body, but my state of mind. And I wasn't really all that present with all these different aspects that I wanted to be. And I think I've realized that, I think in my mind, we're very privileged that we have so many things provided for us. The stage is pretty much set, and we had to turn up in the morning, turn up in the afternoon, and do our job. But I think when in everyday living, I think we all have much greater stresses from family, professional stress, personal stress, etc. So once I was exposed to that, I tried to kind of design a lifestyle that was suited for me personally, and I think everyone can do that. And for me, I knew that I needed to be near the water. I needed to be out near the open, and get fresh air, and be present for my kids, and be a good partner as well. So it was only past retirement that I learned these lessons, and it's taken me many years to try and create this lifestyle that is sustainable, but also beneficial for everybody.
Do you think you'd have benefited more as an athlete because it's very easy to get caught up in just being fully immersed in your sport and just thinking about the next race, the next training session. Do you feel you would have benefited if you'd had that ability to be present outside of your sport and almost compartmentalize your life a little bit better?
Yeah, look, I don't think so, because I was, I made the comeback for London, and at that stage I already had the skincare brand going, and I had 2 kids and a third one on the way, and I managed to get back to the level that I was at when I first retired. So I didn't think, I proved to myself that it's definitely doable. I think there's definitely some sacrifices that need to be made when you're racing in that elite level. So no, I certainly don't have any regrets, and I learned a lot throughout the process, but now certainly no regrets.
You talked about the sacrifices you had to make. What do you feel is like the biggest sacrifice that you have to make when you're at that level?
I don't really like the word sacrifice, because we get a choice. When I was at high school, and I had a choice of going to the school camp or competing against kids my age for the state title, I would always go, I want to compete, and I want to be part of this different kind of journey. So I think sacrifices are like part of our journey, whatever way we're going. So there's just choices that you might not hang out with your friends as much. You may not be exposed to things that the average teenager might be. But for me, I always enjoyed what I was doing. And I had this, I don't know where the drive came from, to be honest. People ask me, but I was always very driven and pretty single-minded.
Yeah, and you said you'd go into events where you were the favourite as well. Like there's expectation that comes with that. There's loads of there's probably a load of people talking about how well you can do. How did you manage that expectation? How did it feel for you?
Yeah, look, I think initially for me, I would always almost get my mental edge by overtraining. And it's, physically I was only 6'3", and, I wasn't as gifted as, the Alexander Popovs and some of the other guys that were on the circuit at the time. But I felt that I was always very well prepared. I don't think in 13 years on the Australian swim team, I might have missed 2 sessions, and that was, either through injury or just pure fatigue. So, I think that was my edge, knowing that I could stand on the blocks, and I prepared myself better than the next guy. But yeah, it's a very hard one to find whatever that edge is, within each swimmer.
And you'd held multiple world records as well eventually. So did you have a goal to do that? Did it get to a point where I'm going to go in the water and I feel confident that this is going to be a world record time?
It was always that's the mental kind of approach that I wanted to create at the end of 96 after that disappointment in Atlanta. And even though I didn't do it every single time, but by mid 97 and then towards the latter days of 97, I was able to, actually be competing or swimming, to break world records. And, luckily or fortunately, I was able to break the world record in 100 butterfly, where I was training for the 200 freestyle for years and years. So I think it just proves that it's more about how you approach the process rather than what the outcome is, because I never thought that I'd be a world record holder in butterfly.
Yeah, that kind of nice to hear, like that it's the process of just allowing it to happen and just see if that's where you get, and rather than getting in the water and just gunning it and thinking, right, I'm going to get a world record. What experience do you think you had that had a negative impact on you? But if it hadn't happened, you wouldn't be where you were now.
Well, I think for me, definitely that 96 experience of, feeling like I was completely out of my depth, like coming to the pool on the day of the 200 freestyle and not being able to find my coach, my team, I just felt so, like overawed by the occasion. And that was the biggest learning curve for me. And and I had to put myself in that situation more and more to overcome it. And it didn't, as I said, it didn't take very long, but that was the biggest learning curve, in a sense that I realized that I need to be in this situation more to deal with these kind of emotions and, learn the sounds and whatever it is. So, I mean, some people walk out on pool deck for the first international meet and they're not fazed by anything. But for me, even, coming to the warm-up pool and seeing hundreds of swimmers in each lane, and, I started to sort of lose my composure. And that's what I learned, that I needed to find a way. And that was through structure and training really well and competing a lot. So there's definitely a method behind my madness, but that's the thing that turned me around really quickly.
Did you find a way that you could simulate that sort of pressure, that sort of feel and that intensity that you were feeling at some point, or just train and then get to the next experience and try and put it into practice?
It's very hard to simulate, the experience of standing on the blocks at Olympic Games. So it's almost, you have to try, and it's like a rehearsal in your mind. Even if in the corporate space, if you're about to do a presentation, or even if it's on the track, it's trying to replay that. That's why you see athletes having that same routine, like Rafael Nadal with the drink bottles, etc. Yeah. I think it's almost like we try and create ourselves like to be little robots, and but obviously we're not, and some things get to us more than others. But that's obviously the objective.
And it's obviously been a really tough time for athletes at the moment that are going through getting into Tokyo. What do you sort of predict from a swimming point of view, maybe an Australian swimming point of view, for Tokyo?
Yeah, it's been really fascinating to follow, actually, because I think the swimmers overall have been exposed to the pools a lot less in the last 18 months, and they've probably done a lot less in water training, and everyone's been in the same boat, and they've obviously had their own nations to kind of help them navigate through everything. But one thing that was, so refreshing to see is that how fast everyone is swimming already. Like I think, the US trials haven't happened, but they've had some lead up races, and the Dressels, the Ledeckis are swimming really well. Even in the UK, you had the national trials just recently, and Adam Peaty's on fire, and you've got all these guys that are already swimming so well. And we always, question how do these guys continue getting better, especially with this preparation of 18 months where they've had limited time in the pool. So I think it's a learning curve for everybody that, maybe we don't need to be in the pool as much, and we need to change our training. And so I think those guys that are natural kind of swimmers, and it comes easily to them, will do really well.
I actually never thought of that this games could have an impact on how athletes train if they actually get the same amount of if they still start beating times, beating world records, and the games is almost not different. I never really thought of that. Really thought that they would look back and go, well, we don't. Coaches are getting it wrong.
70 Ks, and like the likes of Adam Peaty and whatever. I think they can, they're focusing more on quality rather than quantity, and seeing the guys, thinking outside the square and in the backyard and doing chin-ups on the garage door with buckets of water between the legs. I think that being innovative like that has been really refreshing to see.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's kind of a bit like a Rocky montage, isn't it? Everyone's not in the they're not in the like state of the art gym. So hopefully people actually recognise that you don't need all that stuff essentially. Exactly. And most of the theme of people that I've spoken to, that like I remember speaking to Anna Mears and talking about the amount of training that she was doing, and ultimately like everything comes down to that mental approach, that mental side of your game, and if you can. There's obviously been times where that people had a lot of space and can dwell on so much, but if they can get that right, and then the training is sort of you get the bits you need done, you're still going to be as good an athlete as you possibly could be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was very fortunate to learn from so many good swimmers that I wouldn't say necessarily naturally talented, but they knew what their body required to swim fast, and the likes of Gary Hall Jr., and you have many others that didn't need to swim as much as others. And I think, and then it comes, that's, I think athletes' intelligence, where, your body so well that you don't waste any kind of movement, really.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's going to be a real interesting period. Look, I don't want to keep you much longer. You've been awesome. I think the last thing I want to ask is there a book, a person, a documentary that you have found along the way that gave you, whether it was motivation or changed something in you, gave you inspiration?
Look, I must say and I get asked this a lot, but I started the sport when I was 16, and now I'm 43, and I'm certainly not the same person when I was, like I've learned a lot, and there's definitely been different things that have, stimulated me or gave me some kind of learning lessons. So, it was, I think when I was first swimming, for me, it was a quote that was nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And it's, my coach always said, like, this is when I was 12, and he said, you might be a great swimmer one day, but remember this. And then, when I retired, I think that, there's some things as an athlete, I've been able to give back to the sport and, teach kids how to swim, etc. So there isn't a specific person or a book or anything. I think it's my life kind of journey that I've been able to, even within myself. I know that there's some things that excite me and stimulate me, right? Whereas, maybe 20 years ago, that was certainly not the case. So, I think as we grow as a person, and those things, I don't have a thing, there's my Bible that I stick to, so it changes all the time.
Yeah, it's nice to be important, but it's important to be nice. That's really, really good. And it's so true. Like people after, like having gone through my professional cricket career, and I just always recognize, and I think when I speak to any athlete, that just say like, you, the person you are, and will never change and grow, but like it's important to be a nice person throughout that whole journey, because the sporting career has a finite end, and then after that, who are you after that? That's the important part.
And I think that's, I think a lot of people forget that, I think our professional career will come to an end, and there's people have great memories, and you want to. I think as athletes, we put a really good impression in terms of a corporate space, and we can, I think our commitment to work and dedication, etc., can open a lot of doors. But I think if you believe that being an athlete is the end all, then I think you're going to be found short.
Yeah. Look, Michael, thank you so much for coming on. You've been awesome. Where's the best place for people to get a hold of you if they want to find you?
Really simple. I've got a couple of sort of interests at the moment, but if you follow me on Instagram, it's Michael Klim 1, and then I've got the swim schools called Klim Swim, very easy to remember. Klimswim.com. But just send me a message on Instagram and I'll be in touch.
Awesome, mate. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been
no worries,
been
my
amazing.
Pleasure. Thanks, boss.